The sound of the pen scratching against the heavy parchment is the only thing I hear. My father's signature is a jagged, uneven line. It looks like a dying heartbeat on a monitor. He pushes the document toward my brother, Marcus. Marcus takes it with a sharp, greedy motion. He does not look at me. My mother is sitting next to him, her posture perfect. She is wearing the 3-strand pearl necklace my father gave her for their 30th anniversary. She reaches out and pats Marcus's hand, her eyes shining. They are both smiling. It is a small, private smile that does not include me. I am sitting across from them in the mahogany-paneled study. The air smells like old books and the faint, lingering scent of my father's expensive cigars. Sunlight reflects off the glass of the built-in trophy cases, casting sharp glares across the room. Everything looks peaceful. It isn't. You don't need the house, Elena, my mother says. Her voice is soft, like she is comforting a child who lost a toy. Marcus needs the space for his family. You have your apartment in the city. You're so independent. We knew you'd understand. I do not answer immediately. My heartbeat is a heavy thud in the base of my throat. It feels like it might burst through my skin. My palms are damp. I keep them flat on the edge of the desk so they don't shake. I focus on a small scratch in the wood near my right thumb. It is a deep, dark gouge in the polish. I wonder how it got there. You've always been the strong one, my father adds. He coughs, a dry, rattling sound. He looks older than 60. His skin is the color of old newspaper. He won't look me in the eye either. He looks at the legal papers instead. The papers that effectively erase my 32 years of loyalty to this family. I take a slow, controlled breath. I count to 4 as I inhale. I count to 4 as I exhale. I can feel the tension in my shoulders, a tight knot that threatens to travel up my neck. I do not let it. I do not scream. I do not cry. I simply watch them. They look like a portrait of a happy family. The golden son, the proud mother, and the dying patriarch. I am just the background. I am the shadow in the corner of the frame. I'm Elena. I'm 32. And somehow, in my own family, I'm still the extra chair at the table. For 10 years, I managed the estate. I handled the taxes. I fixed the mistakes Marcus made when he was too drunk or too bored to care. I thought that work meant something. I thought it earned me a place. I was wrong. To them, I am a tool. Tools are used until they are no longer needed. Then they are put away. Marcus leans back in the leather chair. It is the chair he thinks he has inherited. He adjusts his watch, a heavy gold Rolex that was a gift for a graduation he barely earned. He looks at me now, and there is a flicker of triumph in his eyes. It is subtle, but I see it. He thinks he has won. He thinks he has finally pushed me out of the inner circle. I hope there's no hard feelings, Marcus says. He sounds bored. Business is business, right? Dad wanted to keep the legacy together. Splitting it up would just weaken the brand. I look at him. I see the way his tie is slightly crooked. I see the way he holds himself with an arrogance that he hasn't earned. He is 40 years old and has never had to fight for anything in his life. Everything has been handed to him on a silver tray. Even my inheritance. I understand perfectly, I say. My voice is steady. It is calm. It is the voice I use when I am negotiating with contractors or firing an underperforming employee. It is a professional voice. It does not betray the fact that my stomach feels like it is full of broken glass. They think this is the end of the story. They think they have closed the book and put it on the shelf. They have no idea that I have been writing my own chapters in the dark. I'm curious. Have you ever stood in a room full of people who share your blood and felt completely alone? Have you ever realized that the people who are supposed to love you the most see you as nothing more than a convenience? If you have been through something like this, I want you to tell me about it. Leave a comment and let me know where you are listening from. It helps to know I'm not the only one. And if you want to see how a shadow learns to bite, make sure you like this and stay with me. I need to tell you how we got here. It didn't start with this meeting in the study. It didn't start with my father's illness. It started much earlier. It started on a Tuesday in July, 20 years ago. The memory is as sharp as a razor. We were at the summer house in Greenwich. The air was thick with the smell of freshly cut grass and the salt from the sound. I was 12. Marcus was 20. I remember the way the sunlight hit the water, making it look like it was covered in diamonds. I was sitting on the porch, reading a book about architecture. I wanted to build things back then. I wanted to create something permanent. Marcus came out of the house. He was laughing. He had a glass of iced tea in one hand and a set of car keys in the other. He didn't see me. He walked over to my father's vintage Jaguar, the one I wasn't allowed to touch. I watched him get in. I watched him back it out of the driveway. He was going too fast. He hit the stone pillar at the end of the drive. The sound of metal crunching against rock was loud, like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. I ran down the steps. Marcus was white as a sheet. He looked at the crumpled fender, and then he looked at me. His fear turned into something else. It turned into a calculation. "Tell Dad you did it," he said. I looked at him, confused. "Why?" "I can't even drive, Marcus. Just tell him you were playing in it, and you knocked the gear shift," he hissed. He grabbed my arm. His grip was tight. It hurt. "If I tell him, he'll take away my trip to Europe. He won't do anything to you. You're just a kid. He'll just sigh and call the insurance company." I remember the way the grass felt under my bare feet. It was cool and damp. I looked at my brother, the person I looked up to, and I realized he didn't care about me at all. He only cared about his trip. When my father came outside, Marcus didn't even wait for him to ask. He pointed at me. "Dad, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice full of fake concern. Elena was playing in the front seat. I told her to get out, but she must have bumped the lever. My father didn't look at the car. He looked at me. I waited for him to see the lie. I waited for him to look at Marcus's shaking hands. He didn't. He just looked disappointed. "Go to your room, Elena," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He was just tired. "I'll deal with you later." I didn't argue. I didn't tell the truth. I walked back into the house, past my mother who was standing in the doorway. She didn't say anything either. She just reached out and smoothed Marcus's hair. That was the first time I realized how the hierarchy worked. Marcus was the investment. I was the overhead point. 20 years later, sitting in the study, I realized nothing has changed. They are still protecting the investment. They are still writing off the overhead, but there is one thing they forgot. Overhead is what keeps the building standing. And if you remove the support beams, the whole structure comes down. I stand up from the mahogany table. I smooth the front of my charcoal gray suit jacket. The fabric is wool and silk. It feels expensive. It feels like armor. "Thank you for being so transparent," I say. I pick up my leather briefcase. "Are you going back to the city tonight?" my mother asks. She sounds relieved that I'm not making a scene. "Stay for dinner. We're having the lamb." "I have work to do," I say. I don't look back as I walk out of the room. I walk down the long hallway, past the portraits of ancestors who built this fortune on the backs of people like me. I walk out the front door and into the cool evening air. The city skyline is visible in the distance. The lights of the skyscrapers look like embers in the dark. I get into my car. I don't start the engine right away. I sit in the silence and feel my heartbeat slow down. The pounding in my throat is gone. It is replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They think they have won. They think I am going back to my apartment to cry and drink wine and wonder why they don't love me. They are wrong. I am going back to my office. I am going to open the file I have been keeping for the last 3 years. The file with the bank statements Marcus thought I didn't see. The file with the emails my father sent when he thought the encryption was enough. They treated me like an employee for a decade. They forgot that employees have access to the ledger. And I have been a very, very careful bookkeeper. The road back to the city is a ribbon of wet asphalt reflecting the neon glow of gas station signs and the cold, white light of overhead street lamps. My hands are steady on the leather-wrapped steering wheel, but the skin of my knuckles is pulled so tight it looks like translucent parchment. The heater is blowing a steady stream of dry air against my face, yet I can feel a chill settling deep into my marrow that no climate control can reach. I feel nothing. I drive past the familiar landmarks of the wealthy. The iron gates of the country clubs and the manicured hedges of the estates give way to the industrial hum of the city's edge. By the time I reach Park Avenue, the rain has turned into a fine, persistent mist that clings to the glass of the Chrysler Tower, turning the silver spire into a ghostly needle piercing the dark clouds. The smell of the city is different tonight. It usually smells of ambition and exhaust, but tonight it smells like wet stone and old metal. It smells like the truth. I park the car in the underground garage of my building. The silence here is heavy. It is the kind of silence that exists only in places where people pay for their privacy. I sit for a moment, watching the red light of the security camera blink in the corner of the concrete ceiling. My phone vibrates in the center console. It is a text from Marcus. Don't forget to send over the Q3 projections by Monday morning, it reads. I need to look like I've got a handle on things before the board meeting. He doesn't say please. He doesn't say thank you. He doesn't acknowledge the fact that he just stole my future 3 hours ago. To him, I am still the reliable machine that keeps his world spinning. He thinks he can sign me out of the will and still keep me on the payroll of his life. He is wrong. I walk into my apartment and don't turn on the lights. The floor-to-ceiling windows offer enough light from the city below. The amber glow of the streetlights spills across my hardwood floors, highlighting the edges of the minimalist furniture I chose because it felt like it belonged to no one but me. I drop my keys on the marble counter. The sound is sharp and final. I go to the small built-in desk in the corner of the bedroom. I open the bottom drawer and move a stack of architectural magazines. Beneath them is a black external hard drive. It is small, cold, and heavy. It contains the last 3 years of my life. It contains the shadow ledger. As I plug it into my laptop, a memory hits me with the force of a physical blow. It was 5 years ago at the annual Founders Dinner. I had worked for 6 months on a merger that would have saved the family firm from a hostile takeover by the Sinclair Group. I had stayed up until 3 in the morning for weeks, drinking burnt coffee from the Starbucks downstairs until my heart felt like it was vibrating in my chest. I had negotiated every clause, closed every loophole, and convinced the Sinclair board to walk away. At the dinner, my father stood up to make the announcement. He raised his glass of vintage Bordeaux and smiled at the room. He talked about the importance of legacy and the strength of the family name. Then he turned to Marcus. I want to thank my son, Marcus, for his tireless leadership on this deal, my father said. His vision and his grit are what carried us through. The room erupted in applause. I was sitting 3 chairs away. I felt the heat rise in my face, a burning, prickling sensation that made my eyes water. I looked down at my plate, at the perfectly seared scallop I couldn't bring myself to eat. I waited for Marcus to say something. I waited for him to mention my name. Instead, he stood up, took a bow, and raised his glass to our father. I was invisible. I remember the way the silk of my dress felt against my skin in that moment. It felt like a shroud. I realized then that I wasn't an employee and I wasn't a daughter. I was a ghostwriter for a story I was never allowed to star in. I looked at my mother, hoping for a glance of recognition, but she was too busy beaming at Marcus, her hand resting on his arm as if he were the sun, and she was a planet finally finding its orbit. I click open the first folder on the drive. It is labeled Project Mirror. I start scrolling through the files. Here is the evidence of Marcus's gambling debts, hidden behind a series of shell companies he thought were untraceable. Here are the emails from the mistress he's been paying off with company funds, the one my mother knows nothing about. And here, most importantly, are the records of my father's offshore accounts. The ones he hasn't declared to the IRS. The ones that prove the family fortune isn't just built on hard work and legacy, but on systematic tax evasion and money laundering. My heart starts to pound against my ribs. It is a slow, rhythmic thud. It feels like a drumbeat in an empty hall. I am not a person who enjoys destruction. I am a person who builds things. But you cannot build a new house on a foundation of rot. You have to burn the old one down first. I hear a soft chime from the kitchen. It's the smart fridge reminding me that I'm low on milk. It's such a mundane, human sound in the middle of this cold, calculated moment. I let out a short, jagged breath that might have been a laugh if I were capable of laughing right now. I wonder if they will even see it coming. Probably not. They are too busy admiring their own reflections in the trophies I polished for them. They think I am the loyal dog who will stay at the gate even after being kicked. They have forgotten that a dog who knows the house also knows where the structural supports are weak. I open a new document and begin to draft an anonymous tip to the SEC. My fingers fly across the keys. The clicking sound is the only noise in the apartment. It sounds like a countdown. I stop for a moment. My hand hovers over the enter key. A sudden, sharp image of my father's face flashes in my mind. Not the man he is now, dying and bitter, but the man he was when I was 6. He used to carry me on his shoulders through the park. He used to tell me I was his little architect. He said I would build the world. He was right. I am building a world. It's just not the one he expected. I press the key. The file is gone. It is out in the world now, a digital virus designed to dismantle everything they spent 40 years creating. I feel a wave of nausea roll through my stomach. It is followed immediately by a sense of profound, icy calm. The die is cast. There is no going back to the study. There is no going back to the lamb dinner. I stand up and walk to the window. The city is a sea of light. Thousands of people are down there, living their lives, unaware that a storm is brewing in a penthouse on Park Avenue. I watch a yellow taxi swerve to avoid a puddle. I watch a couple arguing on a street corner. I am 32 years old, and I have just destroyed my family. I feel powerful. The phone on the desk rings. It's my mother. I let it ring. I watch the screen light up the dark room, her name blinking over and over. Elena. 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 She wants to talk about the dinner. She wants to make sure I'm not upset about the house. She wants to manage my emotions so she doesn't have to feel guilty about her own choices. I won't give her that satisfaction. I won't give any of them the comfort of my compliance ever again. I walk to the kitchen and pour myself a glass of water. The water is cold and clear. I drink it slowly, feeling it slide down my throat. I look at my reflection in the dark glass of the oven. I don't look like a victim. I look like a strategist. I need you to understand something. This isn't about the money. I have enough money. This isn't about the house. I never liked that house. It was too full of secrets and the smell of furniture polish. This is about the cost of being underestimated. It is a debt that has been accruing interest for 32 years, and the bill is finally due. If you have ever been the one who did all the work while someone else took all the credit, you know exactly how I feel right now. You know that moment when the resentment stops being a burden and starts being a weapon. Tell me in the comments if you've ever reached that breaking point. Tell me what it felt like to finally stop caring about their approval. I set the glass down on the counter. The condensation leaves a perfect circle on the marble. I look at it for a long time. It is a small, temporary mark. Tomorrow, the investigators will start looking at the books. Tomorrow, Marcus will get a phone call he can't charm his way out of. Tomorrow, my father will realize that the daughter he sidelined was the only thing keeping his legacy from collapsing. I walk back to my bedroom and lie down on top of the covers. I don't take off my suit. I don't close my eyes. I just watch the lights of the city flicker and dance on the ceiling. The silence is finally gone. Now, there is only the sound of the future arriving. It sounds like thunder. I didn't sleep. The sunrise over the East River was a bruised purple, bleeding into a pale, sickly yellow by 7 in the morning. I watched the light crawl across my bedroom floor, inch by inch, until it touched the toes of my shoes. I hadn't taken them off. I spent the night sitting in the velvet armchair by the window, watching the digital clock on the nightstand flicker through the hours. Each minute felt like a drop of water in a slow, steady leak. My body was heavy, weighed down by the sheer gravity of what I had done, but my mind was spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. I felt like a spectator in my own life, watching the version of myself who had pressed the send button with a mixture of awe and terror. My skin felt tight, as if I had outgrown it overnight. My hands were cold. I stood up and went to the kitchen. The ritual of making coffee felt different today. Usually, it's a mindless task, a bridge between sleep and the demands of the day. Today, every sound was amplified. The clatter of the ceramic mug, the hiss of the water, the grinding of the beans. It all sounded like a construction crew working inside my skull. I didn't want the coffee, but I needed the heat. I held the mug between my palms and felt the steam dampen my face. I stared at the dark liquid and thought about the SEC investigators. Right now, they would be opening their emails. They would be seeing the attachments. They would be looking at the spreadsheets that I had spent months perfecting. I wondered if they would be impressed by the organization. I had categorized every bribe, every laundered dollar, and every offshore transfer with the precision of a surgeon. I had made it easy for them. I had given them a map to the bodies my father had buried under the foundation of his empire. I'm curious, do you think people are born cold, or does the world freeze them out one rejection at a time? I wasn't always like this. There was a time when I wanted to be the glue. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I was indispensable enough, they would eventually have to see me. If you've ever been the person who tried to fix a breaking family until your own hands were bleeding, tell me about it in the comments. I want to know when you finally decided to let go of the rope. And if you're waiting to see how long it takes for the first crack to show in the firm, make sure you stay tuned. I changed into a fresh suit, navy blue this time, the color of authority and calm. I applied my makeup with a steady hand, masking the dark circles under my eyes with expensive concealer. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked exactly like the woman they expected to see. I looked like the loyal, tireless Elena who would show up at the office at 8:30 a.m. to start cleaning up Marcus's latest mess. The elevator ride down to the lobby was silent. I stood perfectly still, my reflection caught in the polished brass of the doors. I looked composed. My heart, however, was doing a frantic, uneven dance against my ribs. It felt like a trapped bird beating its wings against a cage. I could feel the pulse in my neck, a sharp, rhythmic drumming that made it hard to swallow. I adjusted my silk scarf, hiding the tremor in my throat. I walked out into the crisp morning air and hailed a taxi. The city was in its usual state of organized chaos. The smell of exhaust and hot asphalt was thick. I watched the pedestrians on the sidewalk, people rushing to jobs they probably hated, carrying umbrellas against the threat of more rain. They looked so simple. Their problems felt small compared to the tectonic shift I had just triggered. As the taxi crawled through traffic toward Midtown, a memory pushed its way to the surface. It was 2018. We were in the middle of a high-stakes acquisition of a boutique architectural firm in London. It was supposed to be Marcus's big win. He had been leading the negotiations for months. I was brought in at the 11th hour to finalize the paperwork, which was code for check Marcus's math. I stayed in the office until 4 a.m. on a Tuesday. I found a $4 million discrepancy in the target firm's pension fund liabilities. Marcus had missed it completely. If we had moved forward, we would have been on the hook for a massive legal settlement within 6 months. It would have crippled our liquidity. I brought the findings to my father's office the next morning. I was exhausted, my eyes burning from the glow of the monitor, but I was proud. I thought I had saved US.my father didn't thank me. He didn't even look at the spreadsheet. He looked at his watch, and then he looked at me with a cold, simmering irritation. You're slowing down the momentum, Elena, he said. Marcus has been working on this for half a year. He has the relationship with their CEO. If you start poking holes in the deal now, it makes us look indecisive. It makes Marcus look like he doesn't have a handle on his own department. But Dad, I said, the words catching in my throat, it's a $4 million hole. It's a liability we can't afford. Fix it quietly, he snapped. Don't mention it in the meeting. Adjust the terms on our end without making a scene. And for God's sake, stop trying to show up your brother. It's unbecoming. I remember standing there, the heavy paper of the report shaking in my hand. I felt like I had been slapped. I had done my job perfectly. I had protected the family's interests. And I was being punished for it because the truth was less important than Marcus's ego. I realized then that my father didn't want a partner. He didn't even want a daughter. He wanted a ghost in the machine. I fixed it, of course. I stayed up another night, rewrote the contracts, and buried the liability in a complex series of clauses that the other side was too eager to sign to notice. Marcus got the credit. He got a front-page feature in the Wall Street Journal's business section. He didn't even buy me a coffee. The taxi pulled up in front of the glass and steel tower that bore our name. The lobby was grand, all white marble and soaring ceilings. I swiped my keycard and the turnstile clicked open. It was a sound I had heard thousands of times. Today, it sounded like a trap snapping shut. I took the express elevator to the 42nd floor. When the doors opened, the atmosphere was already different. Usually, the office is a place of quiet, professional hum. This morning, there was a frantic energy in the air. People were huddled in small groups near the coffee stations. The receptionists were speaking in hushed, urgent tones. I walked toward my office, keeping my gaze fixed straight ahead. I didn't want to make eye contact with anyone. I needed to get behind my desk. I needed the physical barrier of my workstation. Elena, I froze. It was Mr. Henderson, the family's head of legal. He was a man in his late 60s who always smelled of peppermint and expensive stationery. He was walking toward me, his face a pale shade of gray that matched his hair. He looked like he had seen a ghost. I in my office. Now, he said. It wasn't a request. I followed him. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might be able to see it through my suit jacket. My palms were suddenly slick. I wiped them on the sides of my skirt as I stepped into his office. He closed the door and locked it. The room was traditional, filled with heavy law books and photos of him shaking hands with 3 different governors. He sat down behind his desk and leaned forward. He didn't offer me a seat. We just got a call, he whispered. The tone of his voice was terrified. The SEC is serving a subpoena. They're coming for the servers, Elena. They're coming for everything. I felt a surge of cold electricity run down my spine. It was happening. It was actually happening. I forced myself to look confused. I tilted my head slightly and let my mouth drop open just a fraction. The SEC? I asked. My voice sounded thin, which was perfect. For what? We've been totally compliant. Henderson laughed, a dry, bitter sound. Don't play naive with me. Not today. Someone leaked the mirror accounts. Someone gave them the internal ledger for the Caymans project. They have names, Elena. They have dates. They have signatures. He stood up and started pacing the small room. My father is going to have a heart attack, he muttered, more to himself than to me. Marcus is going to be in handcuffs by the end of the week if we can't figure out who did this. I watched him. I watched the way he worried his lower lip with his teeth. I felt a strange sense of detachment. It was like I was watching a movie. I knew how the scene was going to end. I had written the script. Does Dad know? I asked. He's on his way in, Henderson said. He's coming from the estate. I called him 20 minutes ago. We need to start a purge. We need to find out where the leak came from, and we need to do it before the agents get here at noon. He stopped pacing and looked at me. His eyes were sharp, calculating. You've been the one managing the digital transition, Elena. You have the access codes. I need you to go through the logs. I need to know who accessed the Project Mirror files in the last 48 hours. My stomach dropped. I hadn't thought about the logs. I had used a VPN, and I had cleared my history, but Henderson was right. A forensic audit would eventually find the path. I had to stay ahead of them. I had to be the one to investigate the breach. I'll get right on it, I said. I stood up. I'll start with the server room access, Elena, Henderson said, stopping me at the door. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. If it was Marcus. If he was the one who messed up and let someone in. We have to protect the patriarch. Do you understand? The legacy comes first. Everything else is secondary. I looked at him. I saw the desperation in his eyes. He wasn't talking about the company. He was talking about his own skin. He had been complicit in every one of my father's schemes for 30 years. He knew that if the ship sank, He was going down with the captain. I understand perfectly, I said. I walked out of his office and back into the hallway. The chaos had intensified. I saw Marcus through the glass wall of the conference room. He was shouting into his phone, his face a deep, angry red. He looked like a cornered animal. He looked like the boy who had blamed me for hitting the stone pillar 20 years ago. I felt a sudden, sharp pang of something that felt like regret, but I realized quickly it was just hunger. I hadn't eaten in 24 hours. My body was reacting to the stress in ways I couldn't control. My vision blurred for a second, and I had to reach out and touch the wall to steady myself. The wallpaper was a textured silk, cool and expensive. I made it to my office and shut the door. I sat down in my chair and stared at my computer screen. The cursor was blinking, steady and indifferent. I was no longer the extra chair. I was the person holding the matches. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't cold. I was burning. I reached for the mouse. I had 3 hours before the agents arrived. 3 hours to make sure the trail I had left pointed exactly where I wanted it to. I wasn't just destroying them. I was framing the narrative. This is the moment where most people would blink. This is the moment where the guilt would start to eat at you. But then I remember the London merger. I remember the Jaguar. I remember the look on my mother's face as she signed away my life while wearing her anniversary pearls. I don't feel guilty. I feel busy. If you've ever had to protect yourself from the people who were supposed to protect you, you know that there is no such thing as going too far. You do what you have to do to survive. Tell me if you've ever had to be your own hero. I'm reading every word. The phone on my desk rang. It was the front desk. Your father is here, Elena, the receptionist said. Her voice was shaking. He wants everyone in the boardroom. Right now. I took a deep breath. I smoothed my hair. I checked my reflection in the dark screen of the monitor one last time. The game was officially on. I stood up and walked toward the boardroom. The smell of peppermint and panic followed me. Down the hall. It was time to face the man who thought I was nothing. It was time to show him exactly what nothing can do. I pushed open the double doors. The room was full of men in expensive suits, all of them looking at my father. He was sitting at the head of the table, looking like a king on a crumbling throne. He looked at me. His eyes were hard. Sit down, Elena, he said. We have a traitor in the house. I sat down. I looked him right in the eye. I know, Dad, I said. I'll help you find them. The air in the boardroom is thick, a heavy mixture of expensive cologne and the metallic scent of ozone from the cooling fans in the server racks. My father is at the head of the long, polished table. He looks like a statue carved from old, gray stone. His hands are flat on the mahogany surface, his knuckles white. Marcus is pacing behind him, his footsteps a rhythmic, annoying thud on the thick carpet. He's sweating. I can see the dark patches under the arms of his light blue shirt. He keeps tugging at his collar as if it's a noose. Henderson is slumped in a chair, his face buried in a yellow legal pad, scribbling notes that I know are useless. It has to be someone in IT, Marcus says. His voice is high and tight, like a wire about to snap. They have the access. We need to seize their phones. We need to lock the building down. Dad doesn't look at him. He doesn't look at Henderson. He is looking at me. His eyes are narrowed, searching my face for something. I wonder if he can hear the roar of the blood in my ears. I wonder if he can see the way my fingers are digging into the soft leather of my chair. I feel like I'm standing on a high ledge, watching the ground rush up to meet me. It's exhilarating. It's terrifying. I've checked the logs, I say. My voice is steady, a cool contrast to Marcus's frantic energy. The access came from an internal terminal. But it wasn't IT. Everyone stops. Marcus freezes mid-stride. Henderson looks up from his pad, his eyes wide behind his glasses. My father leans forward, his chest heaving slightly with the effort of breathing. Whose terminal? My father asks. I look down at the tablet in my hand. I let a small, practiced frown touch my lips. I want to look hesitant. I want to look like I'm protecting someone. This is the part of the performance that matters most. It was logged in through the executive suite, I say quietly. Using a secondary bypass code. Marcus's face goes from red to a sickly, pale green. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. The secondary codes were his idea. He wanted a way to move money without the compliance department seeing the trail. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was the only one who knew about them. That's impossible, Marcus stammers. I changed those codes last month. I didn't say it was you, Marcus, I say. I keep my tone soft, almost sympathetic. But whoever did this knew the system. They knew where the mirror files were hidden. They knew how to bypass the firewall without triggering the main alarm. You're saying it's an inside job, my father growls. He slams his fist onto the table. The water in the crystal glasses ripples. Someone in this family sold us out. The word family hangs in the air like a poisonous gas. I look at my father, and for a second, I'm not 32. I'm 10 years old again. It's my birthday. I had spent weeks preparing for my recital. I practiced until my fingers were sore. I wanted him to see that I was talented. I wanted him to see that I was worth his time. I remember the way the stage lights felt, hot and blinding. I remember looking into the dark audience, searching for his face. He wasn't there. He was at Marcus's junior varsity baseball game. Marcus sat on the bench for 9 innings, but my father was there. He told me later that men need support more than girls do. He said I was self-sufficient. He said I didn't need him to hold my hand. I remember the coldness that settled in my chest that night. It was the first time I realized that being strong was just another word for being ignored. I look at him now, and the memory makes my resolve harden into ice. We don't know who it was yet, I say. But the SEC agents will be here in less than 2 hours. They won't care about internal politics. They'll just see the signatures on the Cayman's documents. My father's gaze shifts to Marcus. It's a slow, heavy movement. Marcus looks like he's about to faint. Dad, I swear, I didn't do this, Marcus says. He's whining now. Why would I destroy the company I'm supposed to inherit? Maybe because you're underwater with the Crown Group. Henderson says, his voice suddenly sharp. He's found his spine. He knows he needs a scapegoat too. I saw the margin call notice on your desk, Marcus. 5 million. You're desperate. The room explodes. Marcus starts shouting at Henderson. Henderson starts shouting back, citing legal ethics and fiduciary duty. My father is just staring at the table, his face a mask of cold fury. I sit back and watch them. I am the eye of the storm. It's beautiful. They are tearing each other apart, and they haven't even looked at me. I am just Elena. The quiet one. The one who handles the paperwork. The one who doesn't need her hand held. I need you to think about something. When you spend your whole life being the person who cleans up everyone else's mess, you learn where all the filth is hidden. You learn which skeletons are in which closets. And you learn that people will always believe the most obvious lie if it protects their own vanity. If you've ever sat in a room and watched people realize their world is ending, tell me what that looked like. Did they fight, or did they just crumble? I feel a vibration in my pocket. My personal phone. I know who it is. I don't need to look. It's the contact I made at the SEC 3 months ago. The one I've been feeding breadcrumbs to. I stand up. The shouting continues, but I don't care. Where are you going? My father asks. His voice cuts through the noise like a blade. I need to go to the server room, I say. I need to make sure the backup logs are secure before the agents arrive. If there's a way to prove it wasn't Marcus, I'll find it. My father nods once. He looks tired. He looks defeated. Go, he says. I walk out of the boardroom. I walk past the assistants who are staring at the floor, trying to pretend they can't hear the yelling. I walk to the elevator and press the button for the basement. The doors slide shut. I am alone. I let out a long, shaky breath. My heart is pounding so hard it's making my vision pulse. I lean my head against the cool metal wall of the elevator. My skin is clammy. I feel like I might be sick. This is the moment. The point of no return. The elevator reaches the basement. The doors open to a dimly lit hallway. The air here is cold and smells of industrial cleaner. I walk to the heavy security door and swipe my card. The light turns green. The lock clicks. I enter the server room. The noise is a constant, high-pitched whine. Thousands of blue and green lights are flickering on the racks. It looks like a digital city. I go to my terminal. I don't have much time. I need to delete the logs that show my remote access from the apartment last night. I need to leave a digital trail that leads directly to Marcus's private laptop. It's not hard. He uses his birth date as a password for everything. He's that predictable. As I type, I think about my mother. I think about the way she looked at him in the study. The pride. The adoration. I wonder if she'll still look at him that way when he's being led out of this building in zip ties. I wonder if she'll still think he's the golden son when the FBI starts seizing her jewelry and her cars. I feel a sharp pang of regret. It's gone in a second. I am not the one who broke this family. I am just the one who stopped holding the pieces together. I finish the upload. The trail is set. To any investigator, it will look like Marcus tried to wipe the evidence and failed. It will look like a desperate man trying to cover his tracks. I log out and shut down the terminal. The room goes quiet for a second, or maybe it's just the blood rushing in my head. I check my watch. 1 hour until the agents arrive. I walk back to the elevator. I feel lighter. I feel like I'm finally breathing for the first time in years. When I get back to the 42nd floor, the lobby is full of men in dark suits. They aren't waiting for the elevators. They are already moving toward the executive suite. They have badges on their belts. They have boxes for evidence. The storm has arrived. I see Marcus being stopped near the reception desk. An agent is talking to him. Marcus is shaking his head, his hands up in a defensive gesture. He looks small. He looks like a child. I walk toward them, my face set in a mask of concern. Can I help you? I ask the lead agent. My voice is professional. It's calm. Elena? My brother calls out. His voice is cracking. Elena, tell them. Tell them I didn't do anything. I look at him. I look at the fear in his eyes. For a split second, I want to help him. I want to be the sister he needs. Then I remember the Jaguar. I remember the $4 million hole. I remember the house I was never going to inherit. I'm sorry, Marcus, I say. I'll do what I can. The agent looks at me. Are you Elena? The one in charge of the digital records? I am. I say. We're going to need your full cooperation, he says. You have it. I reply. I watch as they lead Marcus toward a conference room. I watch as my father comes out of his office, his face a mask of horror as he realizes the scale of what is happening. He looks at me, and for the first time in my life, I see him really see me. He sees the woman who isn't crying. He sees the woman who is standing tall while his world falls apart. He knows. I end that single, silent look. He realizes that the daughter he dismissed is the one who brought him down. He realizes that the shadow has teeth. I don't smile. I don't look away. I just stand there, in the middle of the wreckage, and wait for my turn to speak. The game isn't over. It's just getting started. And I have never been better at playing. The hallway is a blur of navy blue windbreakers with yellow letters. SEC. The acronym feels like a heavy weight, pressing down on the chest of everyone in the building. I stand near the glass wall of the executive suite, watching the agents move with a quiet, lethal efficiency. They aren't shouting. They don't need to. They have the authority of the federal government behind them. The sound of high-speed scanners is a constant, rhythmic whirring, like the sound of a swarm of insects devouring a forest. The air smells of ozone and the bitter, burnt scent of the industrial-grade coffee the agents brought with them in cardboard carriers. It is a sharp contrast to the delicate aroma of jasmine tea that usually permeates this floor. My mother arrives at noon. I see her step off the elevator, her face perfectly composed, though the grip she has on her Hermes Birkin bag is so tight her knuckles are ghost white. She looks like she is walking into a charity gala, not a crime scene. She scans the room, ignoring the agents who are labeling boxes of files, until her eyes land on me. She walks toward me, her heels clicking a sharp, panicked rhythm on the marble floor. Elena, where is your brother? She whispers. Her voice is a jagged edge. Why are these people touching the furniture? They have a warrant, Mother, I say. My voice is a flat, calm line. I can feel a bead of sweat tracing a slow path down my spine, cooling as it goes. My heart is a frantic percussionist in my chest, but I keep my hands folded neatly in front of me. I make sure my expression is one of appropriate concern. Marcus is in the small conference room with their legal team. They're questioning him about the Cayman's accounts. The Caymans? She scoffs, a sound of pure, unadulterated denial. Marcus doesn't know anything about accounts. He's a visionary, Elena. He deals with the big picture. You're the one who handles the numbers. You should be the one talking to them. I look at her. I see the way her eyes dart toward the closed door where Marcus is being held. She isn't worried about the company. She isn't worried about the law. She is worried about her son's comfort. She is worried that the golden boy might have a smudge on his reputation. I was the one who handled the numbers, Mother, I say. That's why I know they're missing $40 million. She flinches as if I had struck her. Don't be dramatic, she says. It's unbecoming. A memory flares up, bright and painful. It was the night of the Founders Gala 4 years ago. I had spent 6 months personally overseeing the fundraising for the new pediatric wing at the city hospital. I had secured the donors. I had designed the brochures. I had even picked the color of the napkins. It was my project from start to finish. When the time came for the award ceremony, the hospital board president stood on the stage and called for Marcus. My father had made a call. He told the board that it would look better for the future of the firm if the heir apparent accepted the honor. I stood in the wings, holding the printed program I had written, and watched Marcus take the crystal trophy. He stood there, soaking in the applause, and gave a 10-minute speech about the importance of giving back that I had ghostwritten for him. My mother was in the front row, crying with pride. She didn't even look at me when I finally joined them at the table. She just told me my lipstick was too bright. It was a lie. I look at her now, and the memory makes the coldness in my gut feel like a superpower. She has spent 30 years perfecting the art of not seeing me. Today, she won't be able to look away. The door to the conference room opens. 2 agents lead Marcus out. He looks small. His tie is undone, and there is a frantic, wild look in his eyes that I've never seen before. He looks at our mother, and for a second, he looks like the boy who crashed the Jaguar. Mom, help me, he says. His voice is a thin, pathetic sound. The lead agent, a man named Miller with eyes like gray flint, stops in front of me. Miss Vaughn, we found the secondary terminal access logs. They're encrypted, but the physical location of the login matches your brother's home office. I nod slowly. I let a look of shock wash over my face. My brother's home office? Are you sure? That doesn't make any sense. Marcus lunges toward me, but the agents hold him back. You! He screams. His face is a contorted mask of rage. You did this. You were the only one who had the bypass codes. You set me up. I step back, my eyes wide. Marcus, what are you talking about? I gave you those codes 3 months ago because you said you wanted to review the audit personally. You told me not to tell Dad. Liar. He shrieks. The silence that follows his outburst is absolute. It is a suffocating, heavy blanket that covers the entire floor. My father has stepped out of his office. He is standing 10 feet away, watching his son lose his mind in front of federal agents. His face is a mask of pure, frozen horror. He looks at Marcus, and then he looks at me. I see the moment the doubt takes root in his mind. I see the moment he realizes that his investment is a liability. Take him out, Miller says to the other agents. They lead Marcus toward the elevators. My mother follows them, sobbing now, reaching for Marcus's arm as if she can pull him back from the edge of the world. She doesn't even look back at my father or me. She is gone, a blur of silk and desperation. My father remains. He looks older than he did an hour ago. The lines around his mouth are deeper. He walks toward me, his steps heavy and uncertain. Elena, he says. His voice is a ghost of itself. Is it true? Did he do it? I look him right in the eye. I don't blink. I don't flinch. I let him see the loyal, heartbroken daughter he thinks I am. The logs don't lie, Dad, I say. I'm so sorry. He sags against the marble reception desk. The man who built an empire on arrogance and exclusion looks like he's about to collapse. He reaches out and takes my hand. His skin is cold and dry. You're the only one left, Elena, he whispers. You have to save us. Help the agents. Give them whatever they need to show it was just Marcus. We have to protect the name. I squeeze his hand. It is the first time he has reached for me in years. It feels like victory. It feels like Ash. I'll do everything I can, Dad, I say. He nods and turns back toward his office, his shoulders slumped. He looks defeated. He is. I turn to Agent Miller. He is watching me with a curious expression. He is a smart man. He knows that in a room full of fire, the person who isn't screaming is usually the one who started it. I have the master encryption keys in my office, I say to him. I can walk you through the transaction history. Lead the way, Miller says. I walk toward my office. My heart has finally slowed down. The frantic drumming is gone, replaced by a steady, cold rhythm. I feel light. I feel powerful. The structure is falling. I am the only thing standing. I wonder how it feels to realize your entire legacy was built on a foundation you never bothered to inspect. If you've ever been the one who saw the cracks before anyone else, you know that the collapse isn't a tragedy. It's a release. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to watch something burn so you could finally breathe the air. I want to hear your stories. I sit down at my desk and open my laptop. The screen reflects in my eyes. I am ready to finish this. I'm curious. Do you think a name is worth more than the truth? My father does. My mother does. Marcus certainly did. They're about to find out that a name is just a word. And words are easily erased. I start typing. The clicks of the keys are the only sound in the room. It sounds like progress. The blue glow from the dual monitors is the only thing illuminating my face. It feels like a cold mask. Agent Miller is standing just behind my right shoulder, close enough that I can smell the faint, sharp scent of peppermint and the stale humidity of his rain-dampened suit. He doesn't move. He doesn't speak. He just watches the lines of code and the names of shell companies scroll past. My fingers are flying across the mechanical keyboard, the rhythmic clicking sounding like a shower of hailstones on a tin roof. I can feel the heat of his presence, a silent pressure that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. My heart is a frantic, trapped thing behind my ribs, thudding with a heavy, uneven beat that I'm sure he can hear in the quiet of the office. I keep my breathing shallow. I keep my eyes fixed on the screen. Here are the wire transfers from the shell company in Zurich, I say. My voice is a low, steady hum. It sounds like someone else is speaking. The bypass code used for authorization is 04-12-84. That's a date, Miller says. He leans in closer. His voice is gravelly, tired. It's Marcus's birthday, I reply. I hit the enter key with a final, sharp tap. The screen refreshes, displaying a list of transfers totaling $6 million, all directed to a private account in the Cayman Islands. Miller lets out a long, slow whistle. He really wasn't subtle, was he? He didn't think he had to be, I say. I lean back in my chair, finally letting my hands rest in my lap. They're shaking. I lace my fingers together, squeezing tight until the skin turns white. He thought he was untouchable. He thought the name on the building was a shield, not a target. I'm curious. Do you believe people are born with a sense of consequence, or is it something that has to be beaten into them? My brother spent 40 years being told the rules were for other people. He honestly believed the world would bend before he did. If you've ever had to deal with someone who thought they were above the law, you know that the crash is always louder than the climb. Tell me in the comments if you've ever seen a golden child finally hit the ground. I want to know if it felt like justice to you, or just like a tragedy. And if you're waiting to see how my father reacts when he realizes his legacy is a lie, stay right here. I look out the window at the rain-streaked skyline of Manhattan. The lights of Park Avenue are blurred, shimmering like sunken treasure beneath the gray mist. A memory hits me, cold and sharp as a winter wind. It was 2015. We were in the boardroom, the same room where Marcus was just being questioned. It was the day of the annual executive promotions. I had just finished the most successful fiscal year in the company's history. I had increased our margins by 12%. I had streamlined the entire operations department. I was 30 years old, and I was waiting to be named Vice President of Operations. My father stood at the head of the table. He didn't even look at the data I had prepared. He didn't look at the graphs or the spreadsheets. He looked at Marcus, who had spent most of the year on a yacht in the Mediterranean, developing international contacts. Marcus has a natural instinct for the business, my father said. He has that fire. Elena, you're meticulous, and we value that. Truly. But Marcus has the vision we need to take us into the next decade. He'll be the new executive VP. You'll continue as the director of finance. We need your steady hand to support his leadership. The silence in the room was deafening. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. I looked at the board members. Most of them wouldn't meet my eye. They knew I did the work. They knew Marcus was a liability. But they also knew who signed their checks. It's about the future, Elena, my father added, his tone dismissive, as if he were explaining a simple concept to a child. Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. I remember the way the silver pen in my hand felt. It was a gift from my graduation. I squeezed it so hard the metal bit into my palm. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. I went back to my office and I did the work. I supported his leadership. I watched him make mistake after mistake, and I quietly fixed them. I was the ghost in the machine, ensuring the engine kept running while Marcus took the bows. The injustice of that moment is a physical weight in my chest. It is a stone that has been sitting there for years, growing heavier with every ignored email and every stolen credit. I look back at Agent Miller. He is reading the screen, his brow furrowed. He doesn't know about the board meeting. He doesn't know about the years of being told I was meticulous, but not visionary. He just sees a crime. He sees a brother who stole and a sister who caught him. The door to my office opens. My father walks in. He doesn't knock. He looks like a man who has aged 10 years in a single morning. His expensive wool coat is damp, and his hair is disheveled. He looks at me, and his eyes are wet. He looks at Miller, and then back to me. Elena, he says. His voice is a broken whisper. Tell me this is a mistake. Tell me they're wrong about Marcus. I stand up slowly. I walk around the desk and take his hand. It feels frail, like the wing of a bird. I can't do that, Dad, I say. My heart is racing, but my face is a mask of perfect, sorrowful composure. The evidence is all here. He's been using the company as a personal ATM for years. He thought he could hide it in the Caymans. My father sinks into the guest chair. He covers his face with his hands. A low, ragged sob escapes him. It is a sound of pure, unadulterated grief. He isn't mourning the money. He isn't even mourning the company. He is mourning the image of the son he created. He is mourning the lie he chose to believe over the daughter who is standing right in front of him. We're ruined. He moans into his palms. The name. The legacy. It's all gone. I kneel down beside him. I put my hand on his knee. I can feel him shaking. It's a rhythmic, pathetic tremor. Not everything is gone, Dad, I say. I'm still here. I've been keeping separate records. I've been protecting the core assets. If we cooperate with the SEC, if we show them that this was Marcus acting alone, we can save the firm. I can fix this. He looks up at me. His eyes are bloodshot, searching mine for hope. He looks at me the way a drowning man looks at a life raft. He finally sees me. But he doesn't see Elena, the daughter. He sees Elena, the solution. You can? He asks. You can really save it? I nod. I will have to take over his role, I say. Fully. I'll need power of attorney for the family accounts to ensure they aren't frozen. I'll need to be named acting CEO immediately. He doesn't even hesitate. Anything, he says. Just save the name. Don't let them take the house. Don't let your mother lose everything. I feel a surge of cold, dark triumph. It is a sharp, electric chill that runs from my toes to the crown of my head. He is giving me the keys to the kingdom. He is handing me the sword he used to keep me in the shadows. He is doing it because he is afraid, and because he has no one else to turn to. I look at Agent Miller. He is watching the scene with a neutral, professional detachment. He knows what I'm doing. He knows that I am consolidating power in the middle of a hurricane. He doesn't care. His job is to follow the money, and the money leads to Marcus. I stand up and walk back to my desk. I pick up a pen. The same silver pen from the 2015 board meeting. I'll have the legal team draft the papers, I say. I turn my back on my father. I look at the screen. The transfers are still there. The evidence of my brother's greed. The evidence of my father's blindness. I am not the steady hand anymore. I am the architect of the new order. The rain is still falling on Park Avenue. The city is a gray, beautiful blur. I feel a sudden, sharp pang of loneliness, but I push it down. You cannot have power and peace at the same time. I made my choice a long time ago. I need you to understand that revenge isn't always a scream. Sometimes, it's a quiet signature on a legal document. Sometimes, it's being the only one left standing when the smoke clears. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to take control of a situation that was falling apart. Did you feel guilty, or did you feel like you were finally where you belonged? I start a new document. The title is Restructuring Plan. The first name I delete from the executive list is Marcus's. The second name I delete is my father's. It is time for the shadows to take the lead. It is time for the meticulously ignored to become the impossible to forget. I hear my father's heavy, labored breathing behind me. He is waiting for me to save him. He doesn't realize that the person saving him is the same person who let the fire start. I keep typing. The clicking of the keys is the only sound left in the room. It sounds like a beginning. It sounds like an ending. It sounds like me. The ink on the power of attorney is still wet, a dark, glistening smear that looks like a bruise on the white bond paper. I hold the document by the edges, my thumb hovering over my father's shaky, desperate signature. My heart is a drum in my ears, a rhythmic, suffocating thud that makes the air in the executive's suite feel thin and electric. I can feel the vibration of the city through the soles of my shoes, the distant rumble of the subway beneath the massive foundations of the tower. I am the CEO. It is a title I have earned 100 times over through silent labor and invisible corrections, but receiving it now feels like inheriting a graveyard. My palms are slick. I wipe them on the silk of my skirt. I walk out of my office and toward the grand boardroom. The agents are still there, but they have moved to the periphery, a silent, watchful audience to the collapse of a dynasty. The board of directors is already seated, 12 men and women who look like they've been sculpted from expensive ice and shared anxiety. They are staring at the door as I enter, their eyes searching for a sign of weakness or a promise of stability. I don't sit in my usual spot at the side of the table, the place where I have spent a decade taking notes and remaining silent. I walk to the head of the room and pull out the heavy leather chair that has belonged to my father for 40 years. It is cold. I remember the winter of 2012, the night of the Legacy Gala at the Pier. It was the 50th anniversary of the firm's founding, a night designed to cement our family's place in the upper echelons of the city's elite. I had spent 6 months personally organizing every detail, from the guest list of international dignitaries to the commemorative book that told the story of our family's rise. When the night finally arrived, my mother pulled me aside in the glittering ballroom, her fingers digging into my shoulder. She told me there had been a mistake with the seating and that the table for the senior partners was full. She asked me to sit at the table with the catering staff and the junior accountants at the far back of the room, hidden behind a floral arrangement. She said it was better for the image if Marcus sat next to the governor, as he was the face of the future. I spent the night watching them laugh and toast from the shadows near the kitchen door. I felt like a servant in my own house. I was invisible. I look at the board now, and none of them are looking past me. They are focused on me with a desperate, hungry intensity that makes the air feel heavy. They need a savior, and I am the only one left who isn't in handcuffs or a state of complete mental collapse. I set the power of attorney on the polished mahogany table with a deliberate, echoing snap. My father has stepped down for health reasons, effective immediately, I say. My voice is a calm, level blade that cuts through the frantic whispers of the room. I am the acting CEO and chairman of the board. I have already authorized full and unconditional cooperation with the SEC and the Department of Justice. One of the older directors, a man named Sterling who has known my father since the 70s, clears his throat and adjusts his gold-rimmed glasses. What about the accounts, Elena? What about the scandal that is already breaking on every news cycle? The stock is already dropping like a stone. The scandal is Marcus, I say. I don't hesitate, and I don't soften the blow with family sentiment. We have the digital logs and the physical evidence of the transfers. We are going to isolate the infection and cut it out before it spreads to the rest of the firm. We will rebrand, restructure, and I will personally oversee the reimbursement of the missing funds from the family's private trust. They nod in a synchronized wave of relief. They don't care about Marcus or the fact that his life is effectively over. They care about their dividends and their reputations. I watch their faces change from panic to a calculated calm, a transformation that is as swift and cold as a winter sunset over the Hudson. They are ready to abandon the son and follow the daughter because I am the one with the map through the minefield. My phone vibrates on the table, the screen lighting up with a picture of my mother. I ignore it. I can imagine her voice, shrill and broken, accusing me of being cold and heartless for failing to protect my brother. She doesn't understand that I am finally doing exactly what she and my father taught me to do. I am protecting the image. I am just changing who is in the frame. I need you to think about the moment you realized your loyalty was a one-way street. That moment when you stopped being the shield and started being the sword. If you've ever had to take the lead because the people above you were too weak or too corrupt to handle the truth, tell me in the comments. I want to know how you felt when you finally sat at the head of the table after years of being pushed to the back. Was it everything you thought it would be? Stay with me for the final chapter, because the hardest part of winning is deciding what to do with the wreckage. The meeting lasts 3 grueling hours. We draft the press release. We appoint a new legal team that isn't compromised by 40 years of family secrets. We plan the internal audit that will lay bare every one of Marcus's failures. By the time I walk out of the boardroom, the sun is beginning to set behind the skyscrapers. The sky is a violent, beautiful orange, the color of a fire that has finally finished its work. I walk back to my father's office. He is still sitting in the guest chair, staring at the empty desk as if waiting for a ghost to appear. He looks small and frail. He looks like a man who has finally realized that his empire was made of nothing but paper and lies. It's done, Dad, I say. I've secured the board's support. The company will survive the week. He doesn't look up at me. What about Marcus? He asks. He's being processed as we speak, I say. The evidence I provided is overwhelming. He'll likely face 10 to 15 years in a federal facility. My father finally looks at me, and there is no pride in his eyes. There is only a deep, hollow fear that makes him look older than his years. You did this, he whispers. You knew he was doing it, and you let him continue until the damage was irreparable, didn't you? You waited for the right moment to let him fall so you could catch the pieces. I look at him, and for a second, I want to lie to him. I want to be the daughter he needs to comfort him in the ruins of his life. But the silver pen is still heavy in my pocket, and the memory of the Pierre is still fresh and bitter in my mind. I did what I had to do to save the legacy, I say. I am just like you. I turn and walk out of the office. I don't look back at the man who is now just a passenger in the vehicle I am driving. I walk past the empty cubicles and the silent, darkened hallways. The building is quiet now, a hollow shell of glass and steel. I go to the window and look out at the city as the lights come on, one by one. I am 32 years old. I am the CEO of a billion-dollar firm. I have everything I ever wanted. I am alone. The silence in my penthouse tonight is the loudest thing I've ever heard. I stand in the center of my living room, the city lights reflecting in the dark glass of my wine cup. I haven't turned on the lamps. I prefer the shadows because they are familiar and they are honest. The phone rings again, the caller ID showing the house in Greenwich. I know it's my mother, but I also know it's the lawyers and the creditors. The vultures are circling. I let it ring until the room is silent again. I watch the screen illuminate the coffee table, a small, blinking light in the vast darkness of the apartment. I think about Marcus in a holding cell. I think about my father in his darkened office. I think about the girl who once wanted to build beautiful things. I wonder if she would be proud of the woman who just tore everything down to build herself a throne. I take a sip of the wine. It is cold and bitter. The rain begins to fall again, a soft tapping against the window pane. It sounds like the scratching of a pen on heavy parchment. It sounds like a signature. It sounds like an ending. I close my eyes and listen to the city breathe below me. I have one. I feel nothing. If you've ever reached the top of the mountain only to find the air is too thin to breathe, you know what I'm feeling right now. You know that victory has a price that isn't listed on any ledger. Tell me if you've ever won a war and wondered if it was worth the casualties. I'm listening. The night is long. The morning will be harder. But I am finally ready. I am the architect. And I have finished the build. I set the glass down on the marble. The sound is a sharp, final click. I walk to my bedroom and take off the navy suit and the silk scarf. I look at myself in the mirror. My face is calm. My eyes are clear. I am finally Elena. I lie down in the dark and count my breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4. The storm is over, but the silence is just beginning. 6 months later, the air in the Greenwich house smells like nothing. It doesn't smell like cigar smoke or expensive perfume or the lemon wax they used to polish the floors every Tuesday morning. It smells like dust and cold air and the hollow echo of a life that has been packed into cardboard boxes. The moving trucks are lined up in the driveway like a funeral procession, their diesel engines idling with a low, vibrating growl that I can feel in the soles of my feet. I am standing in the middle of the foyer, watching a man in a neon vest wrap my mother's favorite porcelain vase in layers of gray bubble wrap. The sound of the tape being pulled off the roll is a sharp, screeching tear in the silence. It sets my teeth on edge. I keep my hands buried deep in the pockets of my cashmere coat so no one can see the way my fingers are twitching. I am the one who authorized this sale. I am the one who signed the liquidation papers. I am the one who finally took the roof off the house of cards. It had to be done. The debt Marcus left behind was a black hole that swallowed everything it touched. The private jet. The summer house in the Hamptons. The French Impressionist paintings that used to define the status of the upstairs hallway. Even the family silver has been cataloged and sold to pay off the interest on loans he took out to cover his gambling losses. My mother is sitting on the bottom step of the grand staircase, the only thing in the room that hasn't been labeled with a lot number. She is wearing a simple black dress and no jewelry. Her neck looks long and fragile without her pearls. She looks like a stranger I met on a train and never intended to speak to again. She is staring at the rectangular patch of wallpaper where the grandfather clock used to stand. The paper there is a brighter, cleaner shade of cream. It is a ghost of the time that has passed. You could have saved this, Elena, she says. Her voice doesn't have the strength to be angry anymore. It's just a thin, brittle thread that threatens to snap with every breath. You have the money. You have the firm. You could have paid off the creditors without selling the family legacy. I look at her, and a memory hits me with the force of a physical blow. It was Thanksgiving in 2016. The table was set for 20 people. The crystal was sparkling under the chandelier, and the turkey was a perfect, golden brown. Marcus had brought his newest girlfriend, a girl who didn't know the difference between a salad fork and a fish fork. There was no place card for me. When I asked the maid where I should sit, my mother looked at me with a vague, annoyed expression. She told me to grab a stool from the kitchen and squeeze in at the corner of the table near the swinging door. She said I was family, and family didn't mind being flexible. I spent the entire dinner sitting on a wooden stool that was 2 inches too short, my chin barely reaching the level of the tablecloth. I watched them toast to Marcus's brilliant future. I watched them laugh until their faces were red. I watched them forget I was even in the room. I minded, mother, I say. I keep my voice soft, a cool contrast to the heat rising in my chest. I am not a monster. I am a bookkeeper. And the books had to be balanced. She doesn't understand. She will never understand that the cost of her comfort was my erasure. She thinks I am being cruel because I refuse to use my personal dividends to bail out Marcus's fraud. I think I am being accurate. Accuracy is the only thing that survives a fire. I walk past her and up the stairs to my father's old study. The mahogany desk is gone, leaving 4 deep indentations in the carpet like the footprints of a giant that has moved on. The built-in bookshelves are empty, their dark wood shelves covered in a fine layer of gray silt. I stand in the center of the void and close my eyes. I can still hear the sound of the pen scratching against the parchment. I can still feel the coldness of the day I was written out of the will. I went to see Marcus yesterday. The visiting room at the correctional facility smells like industrial bleach and stale sweat. He was wearing a tan jumpsuit that was 3 sizes too large for his frame. His hair was thinning at the crown, and his skin had the sickly, gray pallor of a man who hasn't seen the sun in months. He didn't scream at me this time. He didn't call me a traitor or a bitch. He just sat there, looking at his hands through the scratched plexiglass. Why? He asked. He didn't even sound curious. He just sounded tired, because you hit the stone pillar, Marcus, I said. And you let me take the blame for 20 years. He didn't remember. He actually didn't remember the Jaguar or the summer house or the lie that started the rot in the foundation of our relationship. To him, it was just a Tuesday in July. To me, it was the moment I realized that love was a transaction I would never be allowed to complete. He looked at me then, and for a split second, I saw a flash of the brother I used to follow around the garden. Then it was gone, replaced by the blank, hollow stare of a man who has lost everything and still doesn't know what he did wrong. I didn't stay long. There was nothing left to say. I walk out of the study and down the hall to my old bedroom. It is a small, square room at the end of the corridor. The walls are bare, showing the tiny holes where I used to pin my architectural drawings. I remember staying up late with a flashlight, sketching floor plans for houses that had enough rooms for everyone. I wanted to build a world where no one was an extra chair. I realized a long time ago that you can't build something new until you clear the site of the wreckage. I go back down to the foyer. The movers are finished. The house is a hollow shell of glass and stone. My mother is still sitting on the stairs. She looks up at me, and for the first time in my life, I see real fear in her eyes. She is afraid of me. She is afraid of the woman she created by never looking at her. Where am I supposed to go, Elena? She asks. Her hands are shaking. The car is waiting outside, I say. I've arranged a small apartment for you in the city. It's near the park. It's quiet. You'll have a modest stipend from the trust one established. It's more than most people have to start over. It's a cage, she whispers. It's a consequence. I reply. I walk out the front door and into the bright, cold sunlight of a New England autumn. The leaves are turning gold and red, falling from the trees and littering the long, winding driveway. I get into the back of my car. My driver, a man who doesn't ask questions and doesn't tell lies, starts the engine. We pull away from the house, the gravel crunching under the tires like breaking bone. I don't look back. I don't need to. I have the memory of it, and that is a heavy enough burden to carry. I think about my father. He is in the specialized care facility now. He doesn't recognize me most days. He calls me by my mother's name. He asks me when Marcus is coming home from his trip to Europe. I sit with him for an hour every Sunday and hold his hand. I listen to him talk about the empire he built from nothing. I listen to him tell the same 3 stories about the son he loved more than the truth. I don't correct him. I don't tell him the empire is gone. I don't tell him his son is in a cell. I just listen. It is the last service I will ever perform for him. It is the final payment on a debt I never asked to owe. The city appears on the horizon. The skyscrapers are jagged, silver teeth against the pale blue sky. I am the CEO of the firm, but the firm is different now. It is smaller. It is leaner. It is finally honest. I spend my days in meetings with lawyers and forensic auditors. I spend my nights in my penthouse, watching the lights of Park Avenue flicker like embers. I am no longer the shadow in the corner of the room. I am the light that reveals the flaws in the marble. I'm curious. Do you think a person can ever truly start over, or are we just the sum of the things we've had to destroy to survive? I used to think I was defined by what I lacked. Now I know I am defined by what I endured. If you've ever had to burn your old life to the ground to find out who you really are, tell me in the comments. I want to know if you ever missed the smoke. Or if you, like me, finally found peace in the cold, clear air. The car stops in front of the office tower. I look up at the glass and steel. My name isn't on the building yet. Maybe it never will be. I don't need my name on the outside to know who owns the power on the inside. I step out of the car. The wind is sharp and cold. It feels like a slap. It feels like life. I walk into the lobby. The security guard nods to me. The receptionist smiles. I take the elevator to the 42nd floor. The doors open, and for the first time in 32 years, I don't feel like I'm holding my breath. I walk toward my office. I pass the boardroom. I pass the server room. I pass the ghosts of the people who thought they could break me. I sit down at my desk. I pick up my pen. I have a lot of work to do. I am Elena. I am 32. And I am exactly where I am supposed to be. The extra chair is gone. I am the table. The silence is finally my own. It is the sound of a story that has finally found its rhythm. It is the sound of a woman who is no longer waiting for permission to exist. It is the sound of home. I breathe in the air of my office. It smells like paper and ink and expensive coffee. It smells like the future. I am the architect. And the building is finally standing on its own. I start to type. The clicking of the keys is the only sound in the room. It is enough. It is everything.